Welcome to this session on genetics and a new genre of intent-based quantum computers. Now, to launch this, I'd like to quote a line from Sri Aurobindo Savitri. This occurs in Book 1, canto called The Secret Knowledge. Our early approaches to the infinite are sunrise splendors on a marvelous verge, while lingers yet unseen the glorious sun. What now we see is a shadow of what must come. And this quotation I find is very relevant to the topic that we're going to delve into briefly today. It's essentially the dawn of the computing age, the quantum computing age. And this is something extraordinary because when we think about quantum and the quantum realm, really what we're looking at is that layer of reality that separates the visible from the invisible. And today, we are essentially in a reality of child's play, and the possibilities that lie before us are astounding. And in this presentation, I want to give a sense of something of the possibilities as we continue on this journey of quantum computation, and specifically with the filter of genetics. So in this presentation, we're briefly going to go over the genesis of an alternative trajectory of quantum computation. There's, of course, a certain way in which quantum computation is developing today. And in this presentation, I'm going to suggest something different. We're going to briefly consider nature as a single system. We're going to just look at an overview of what I call the quaternary interpretation of quantum dynamics, which is fundamental to the genesis of the alternative trajectory. We're going to look at instances of natural, sophisticated quantum computers. So quantum computers already existing. And what are examples of these, and what can we glean from that? We're going to, in the light of these natural, sophisticated quantum computation devices, look at gene mutation, consider AI versus what I call QI, quantum intelligence. And then we get to the heart of what we're speaking about today, the intent-based quantum computers. And I will draw attention to additional technological possibilities in the spirit of suggesting that everything we do today is essentially a very beginning. And some of these additional technological possibilities basically arise from leveraging atoms, molecules, molecular plans, and cells differently. It's due to our having bottom-up access to genetic type code, which has huge implications for material sciences and maintenance of life. I'll draw attention to a quantum intelligence type quantum computer, and then also suggest that the genetic type code that we can surface due to this alternative trajectory of quantum computation essentially gives us possibilities of inexhaustible energy sources, space travel, quantum feedback mechanisms, and quantum patterns, and so on. So the focus of this talk is not going to be on the work that's already been done in the meeting of quantum physics and genetic engineering. And we already know, and this has been going on for over a decade, of how quantum dynamics serves biological mechanisms, such as the ones responsible for energy transfer at the level of cells. And here I include links for those who are interested. The focus here in this talk is on something far more fundamental and with potentially a far more revolutionary business impact. And this is the fact that genetics is nothing more than an output of quantum computation and can therefore give rise to a new genre of quantum computers. And this is where we're going to go to right now. Why do I say that genetics is nothing more than an output of quantum computation? So let's consider this genesis of an alternative trajectory. Dr. Richard Feynman in the early 1980s, proposed a quantum computer that would imitate nature. And his conception is foundational to the quantum computing industry that has been launched and that is in process of development. Now, when you look at the components of his view on imitating nature, his belief was that nature is probabilistic, and in imitating the quantum mechanical dynamics of nature, we'll subsequently confer computation with extraordinary power. And this is the goal and promise of all development in the industry. So we have, if you look at the pillars of his architecture, it's the idea that nature is probabilistic, that it leverages quantum dynamic properties such as superposition and entanglement. So what's the potential issue with this approach? Primarily this, that what is the right interpretation of nature and what is being imitated? Now, I could make the case that nature is not entirely probabilistic and that there are other quantum dynamic properties, and that even our interpretation of superposition and entanglement can be seen differently. And if we consider these pillars of modern day quantum computation, then right away it gives rise to an alternative trajectory. Now, at the heart of this, I want to first review nature as a single system. We know that all quantum particles are sourced from the quantum levels. All atoms are sourced from quantum particles. All molecules are sourced from atoms. All molecular plans, which is the basis of any living cell, are sourced from molecules. And so it's evident that there is a tight integration between one layer of nature and the next. So the question is, why don't we study it as a single system when trying to get insight into one layer or another? And of course, here specifically, in looking at the quantum realm and in developing a trajectory of quantum computation development, why don't we also consider the other layers that are a part of nature that operates as a single system? And this is going to give us additional insight into possible quantum dynamics. I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail, but I want to quickly make the case of this idea of leveraging or looking at nature as a single system and using what I call reverse extrapolation to begin to read the quantum levels differently. So we know, for example, that any cell, whether it's a plant cell or animal cell or a human cell, it consists of four and only four molecular plans, which are proteins, polysaccharides, nucleic acids, and lipids. Now, if I try to understand the essence of these, what each of these molecular plans stands for, without going into a lot of detail, and there's plenty of research and writings that I've done on the area, then protein is representative of, or in its essence is boiled down to something that we can call presence. Polysaccharides in its essence is boiled down to something that we can call power. Nucleic acids to something we can call knowledge. And lipids to a concept we can call harmony. Now, the interesting thing is that when we go down a level of granularity to the periodic table, we know that classification of the periodic table is in S shell, D shell, P shell, and F shell categories. But when we look at the essence of this, I can make the case that D shell atoms are an embodiment of presence, S shell are an embodiment of power, P shell an embodiment of knowledge, and F shell an embodiment of harmony. Similarly, when you go even further down, so we're reverse extrapolating here, going down to the quantum levels. At the quantum particle level, I can make the case that a Higgs boson is in alignment with this function that we're calling presence, leptons with power, quarks with knowledge, and bosons with harmony. And this root functional pattern, which I'm calling presence, power, knowledge, harmony, therefore arises or perhaps can be found at the quantum level. And this gives rise to a completely different quantum computational trajectory. Now, I've developed a quaternary interpretation of quantum dynamics, And in this, the core concepts, and this is all instrumental to where we're going on the idea of genetics and intent-based quantum computation. And so I need to just lay out some components of this foundation. Let's think about quanta as a bridge mechanism that connects layers together such that the information in one layer can then precipitate or materialize in a more material layer. So quanta is a bridge mechanism whereby information from one layer of existence is parsed out in material form in another layer of more material existence. Now, without going into any details, what's being parsed out is this fourfold mechanism or fourfold functionality that I had referred to as presence, power, knowledge, harmony. And we can see many instances of this across layers of existence. I pointed out three previously. So there's a quaternary expression, and that's a key component of this quaternary interpretation. And then finally, there's quantum object code, which is nothing other than genetic type information. So for example, when we look at the cell and we look at four molecular plans, then we can say that those plans are driven by genetic code. And similarly, we can say that these four functional components that we're calling presence, power, knowledge, harmony are instrumental in creating what I'd call quantum object code for any layer of existence. So whether we're looking at the electromagnetic field or atoms or molecules or molecular plans and cells, then all of these instances of quantum objects would be accompanied by quantum object code, which is nothing other than genetic type information. So it's, in a sense, telling this object that's arising how to behave in the universe. And then when we look at these different layers of quaternary expression, it becomes clear that there's feedback loops that are created. And so this gives the idea of persistent quantum computation that must also be a component of this quaternary interpretation of quantum computation. So now with that as a backdrop, and I know that's a lot of information to share very quickly, but the point is that we must look at our fundamentals then differently. And I'd make the case that the atom is the most successful of quantum computers. So why do I say that? First of all, it's made from quantum particles. We know that. And we know that different types of quantum particles are the basis of what in quantum computation architectures are referred to as qubits. We know that the atom is continually exhibiting quantum dynamics. For example, electrons can be in multiple states, so superposition, there's entanglement that's going on consistently between different atoms of the same atomic number. We know that atoms are in a constant state of quantum computation because as it's subject to different kinds of light or photons, it changes its state and then it outputs either electrons or photons. So input, processing, and output. So it's a definition of computation. It's robust. We know that the atom operates successfully in a range of different environments without losing its integrity. We know it's scalable because atoms chemically bind together and create molecules, they create molecular plans, they create cells, and so on. So we know it doesn't lose what its operation is, which is very different from today's rendering of quantum computation, where it's very difficult to maintain quantum states or quantum lifetimes. And so from this point of view, the atom is the most successful of quantum computers existing to date. And the atom is not just what we think it is or what has been defined, but when we think about the quaternary interpretation of quantum dynamics, then it becomes instrumental in suggesting a different genre of quantum computers altogether. So please keep that in mind. So the question is, what is the atom computing? We know that an atom of atomic number 47, for example, it's silver, and it has very precise behaviors in the universe. It's malleable, ductile, non-corrosive, um, superconductor, and so on. And this is the same for all atoms of silver. So it implies that there's perhaps some kind of code that exists around the atom, which is describing its behavior in terms of the functions that it will display. And this kind of code then is nothing other than what we can call pre-genetic code that exists for the same purpose as genetic code in cells. So of course, this is a big leap in a possible understanding of what an atom is and why it's a quantum computer and what it's computing. And if this is the case, then it opens out immense possibilities for quantum computation along a different trajectory than is being currently traversed. And when we look at other instances of natural sophisticated quantum computers, then we know that since all molecules are comprised of atoms, they are also instances of quantum computers because, after all, they consist of nothing but quantum computers in the form of atoms. When we look at molecular plans that are instrumental to life, lipids, proteins, polysaccharides, nucleic acids, and these are chains of molecules. And so they're even more sophisticated quantum computers. And then finally, when we look at cells that comprise of these four molecular plans, so whether it's a plant cell or an animal cell or a human cell, these four molecular plans animate it. And they're also, from that point of view, nothing other than quantum computers. So the question is, what and how are they computing? And they are computing based on genetic code. So they maintain the integrity, possibilities, and boundaries beyond which cell breakdown occurs. And they also alter that code, as we know from gene mutation, to meet circumstances that individually as cells they may be facing. So when we look at gene mutation, then the point here is that the process by which genes themselves mutate is likely far more fundamental than the manipulation of genes at the genetic level. So it's not just about manipulating genes, but if we look at instances where, for example, we know that there was a divergence so that some chimpanzees became humans, then there's massively significant mutations that took place. And we can think of these massively significant mutations as an outcome of a deep and visceral need emanating from some set of chimpanzees to live and experience life differently. And that need being part of a quantum computer, because we can think of, since cells are nothing other than quantum computers, and therefore we can even think of a quote unquote chimpanzee quantum computer. And this need becomes very deep and is an input into this quantum computation. Then there's effect on code, and there's something different that's output. And as a result, there's a subpopulation of chimpanzees that's forever altered. And here again, I provide a link to some more insight into the genetic materials that humans and chimpanzees share and so on. Now, I want to also draw on this idea, just building off of where we've been on quantum computation and AI, since AI is a very big topic today. So another way to look at all these naturally surfacing quantum computers, that just summarizing the atoms, molecules, molecular plants, cells. So if we look at these, each of these is more sophisticated. So a cell is far more sophisticated in the intelligence it has and the basis of operations it has as compared with an atom. And so it appears that intelligence is being codified and upheld by a series of naturally surfacing and progressively more sophisticated quantum computers. So the implication of this is that there must be some repository of quantum intelligence that exists natively at the quantum levels. And in this point of view, the question then is, how would AI compare with QI, or QI being quantum intelligence? And basically, if we think about AI as leveraging a subset of conceptual mechanisms that derive from human intelligence, and we know that human intelligence is an outcome computed into existence from something we're calling quantum intelligence, then we know by definition that quantum intelligence must be much greater than artificial intelligence. And therefore, any kind of quantum computer or genetic-based quantum computer, and here genetic is used broadly as referring to the genetic type code that exists in any of these natural quantum computational devices, and anything that we may create differently along a different trajectory, then the implication is that any AI that doesn't consider QI in the future, it will be substantially overpowered by it, no matter how we look at it. So there's a new computing game, quantum computing game that is being suggested here. It's not about repeating instructions to construct something that has been fully conceived in a programmer's mind, and that's what's being done with digital computation. But it's about creating something unknown that brings new and deeper possibilities into practical existence. It's not about creating a clever set of logical gates that replicate and manipulate in the same way that digital computers manipulate, but it's about creating different types of gates altogether that allow the seeing, interpretation, and generation of known quantum dynamics, such as superposition, entanglement, tunneling, and annealing, and of unknown quantum dynamics that I've given a hint to here, for example, in terms of this fourfold expression, in terms of quantum intelligence, in terms of the integrity of a function that exists at atoms and molecules and the level of cells. These are all things that must exist natively in the quantum realm. So there's what's required is different kind of gates altogether, very, very different mathematics that drives us, that allows these things to be leveraged and allows computation to occur along these different dimensions. So when we also consider, for example, this evolution from chimpanzee to human, then it's clear that from this point of view and from the model that I've briefly presented here, that there's feedback into the system originating from deep intent. And so there's also another kind of quantum dynamic that's being hinted at called intent magnification. And so what is being suggested here is, when we consider everything we've been through, is that we're talking about an entirely new and different quantum computational game. So there's a new genre of intent-based quantum computers, at the very least. And this is addressing the question of, what is possible with quantum computation. So we already know that in the case of chimpanzees, that some kind of cohesive individual or collective intent is part of the quantum computing architecture. And we already know that there's a lot of dynamics that go on at the subconscious level within human beings. And so the question is, why don't we make this more visible, conscious, transparent, and intentional? And since by this extrapolation, human beings are perhaps a massively sophisticated, though a chaotic quantum computer, through different kinds of quantum computational devices that leverage the kinds of dynamics I'm talking about. And here, of course, I'm looking far into the future, but I just want to seed some possibilities in this session. Then there's possibility of making what's subconscious at the human level far more conscious, and altering consciously the things that we want to through intent. So just wrapping up in terms of summary and possible future. So we spoke about the genesis of an alternative trajectory. We considered nature as a single system.
I found this on the web.
We looked at quaternary interpretation of quantum dynamics. We looked at the idea of natural sophisticated quantum computers, the idea of a deeper process for gene mutation, the comparison between AI and a possible QI, the idea of intent-based quantum computers, and then additional technological possibilities I'm going to refer to due to us leveraging atoms, molecules, molecular plans, and cells differently, and due to us having bottom-up access to genetic type code. This gives tremendous insight, if we can do this, into how to conduct material sciences, maintenance, management of life, medical technology differently. And then also there's an altogether different type of quantum computer. That's a quantum intelligence type quantum computer that's suggested. And then the fact that we have a fourfold energy that emanates from the quantum levels gives us a hint that there's an inexhaustible energy source, and that would be instrumental in space travel. And I referred to also this idea of quantum feedback mechanisms and the generation of different quantum patterns based on this genetic type code that must accompany any kind of quantum object. So again, I'm just drawing out possible things without going into detail about them. Thank you.